1895, dusty crossroads outside Fort Smith, Arkansas. Three outlaws on horseback surround Bass Reeves, the legendary Black U.S. Marshal. Cherokee Bill's gang has intercepted him alone on the trail. The leader leans forward, spits directly in Reeves's face. Saliva hits the silver badge pinned to his chest, dripping down the eagle emblem. "That badge don't mean nothing out here, boy," the outlaw sneers. Known fact, Bass Reeves arrested over 3,000 criminals in his career, killed 14 in self-defense, and was never wounded. Not once. Reeves says nothing. He wipes the badge clean with his thumb, watching the gang ride off, laughing, certain they're untouchable in the wilderness. 6 hours later, those same three outlaws are surrounded, exhausted, begging Reeves to stop tracking them. Witnesses claim he hunted them through 40 miles of territory without stopping. What happened in those 6 hours became the most legendary manhunt in Old West history. By 1895, Bass Reeves wasn't just a U.S. Marshal, he was the standard every lawman in Indian Territory measured himself against. Born into slavery in 1838, Reeves escaped during the Civil War by fleeing into Indian Territory, learning to track, hunt, and survive in country that killed softer men. After the war, he became the first black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi River, appointed by Judge Isaac Parker, the famous hanging judge of Fort Smith. The numbers tell the story. Over 3,000 arrests across 32 years. 14 men killed in the line of duty, all ruled justifiable. 0 wounds received. People called it impossible. Reeves called it work. He spoke Creek, Seminole, and Cherokee fluently, moved through native territory like he'd been born there. The silver badge he wore represented everything he'd fought to become. Freedom, authority, dignity. It wasn't decoration, it was proof. And in the West, disrespecting that badge meant disrespecting the man who'd earned it the hardest way possible. The Crossroads encounter happened on a Thursday afternoon in late September. 3 members of Cherokee Bill's gang, Jim French, Curtis Dason, and a man known only as Lucky, rode up on Reeves while he was watering his horse. They recognized him immediately. The badge was famous, so was the man wearing it. But they were drunk on whiskey and confidence, operating in country they thought they controlled. Jim French, the leader, spat tobacco juice mixed with saliva directly into Reeves's face. The liquid hit the badge, ran down the eagle emblem. "That badge don't mean nothing out here, boy," French said. His companions laughed. Reeves wiped his face, cleaned the badge with his thumb, mounted his horse without a word. The gang watched him ride away, still laughing, certain they'd humiliated the great Bass Reeves. Word reached Fort Smith within 3 hours. Everyone expected Reeves to gather a posse, to make a public show of force. Instead, he saddled a fresh horse, loaded his Winchester, and rode out alone at sunset. Back at his cabin, Reeves studied the territory map he'd been building for 3 decades. Not the official surveyor maps, his own marked with creek crossings, hidden trails, seasonal water sources, places outlaws thought were secret. He knew where the gang would run. Indian territory was vast, but patterns repeated. Outlaws always headed for the same hiding spots: dense timber near water, caves in the hills, abandoned settlements. Cherokee Bill's gang operated out of the Cookson Hills, rough country that swallowed posses whole. But Reeves had tracked through those hills for years. He spoke the languages, knew the families, had informants in every settlement. The gang had a 6-hour head start, maybe more. Standard procedure said wait for backup, organize a proper manhunt. Reeves didn't wait. The insult wasn't about pride, it was about principle. The badge represented the law in a place where law barely existed. Letting it be disrespected meant letting every outlaw in the territory think they could spit on justice. At sunset, Reeves rode north. No posse, no backup, just the badge, the rifle, and 32 years of knowing exactly how men ran when they thought they were safe. Hour 1 began at dusk. Reeves picked up the trail 3 miles from the crossroads, fresh hoof prints heading northwest toward the Arkansas River crossing. The gang wasn't trying to hide yet. They thought distance would protect them, that darkness would erase their tracks. They were wrong on both counts. Reeves pushed his horse at a steady pace. The kind of rhythm that covered ground without exhausting the animal. No food stops, no rest. The moon rose full that night, turning the trail silver. He followed broken branches, disturbed grass, the way wildlife scattered when horses passed. Things other trackers missed, Reeves read like newspaper print. By hour 2, he'd closed the distance to 12 miles. The gang had stopped to water their horses at Vian Creek, left boot prints in the mud. Reeves studied the prints. One man favored his left leg, another wore Mexican spurs. Details that would matter later. The badge on his chest caught moonlight as he remounted. Somewhere ahead, 3 outlaws were drinking whiskey around a campfire, certain they'd escaped. They had no idea what was coming. Hour 3 brought the first crack in the gang's confidence. Jim French heard it first. The distant sound of a horse moving through timber. Too steady to be wild, too deliberate to be coincidence. "Someone's following us," he said. Curtis Dason laughed it off. No lawman would track alone at night through hostile territory. It was suicide. But the sound kept coming, never faster, never slower, just constant pressure from behind. They made a decision, split up. Classic outlaw tactic, taught by every road agent who'd ever evaded a posse. 3 separate trails meant the tracker had to choose one, giving the others time to escape or circle back. They agreed to reunite at dawn near 14 Mile Creek, a spot they'd used before. Jim French took the high ground toward the hills. Curtis Dason followed the creek bed south. Lucky headed straight east through dense timber. They separated confident the plan was sound. What they didn't know, Bass Reeves had been tracking multiple fugitives simultaneously for 3 decades. He read the split immediately. 3 horses, 3 directions, 1 predetermined meeting point. The ground told him everything. French's horse favored its right foreleg. Dason's mount had a chipped shoe. Lucky rode a mare that cropped grass while walking. Reeves followed the freshest trail, Lucky's, for 2 miles, then doubled back to check Dason's path. By studying all 3 trails, he eliminated false leads and identified the reunion point before the gang reached it. While the outlaws thought they'd gain time, Reeves was already moving toward 14 Mile Creek, cutting cross-country through paths only he knew existed. The badge stayed pinned to his chest. The hunt had just begun. Hour 4 found the gang reuniting at 14 Mile Creek, exhausted and unnerved. They'd ridden hard, expecting to lose their pursuer in the darkness. Instead, the sound of hoofbeats had continued, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never stopping. Now they heard something worse. Nothing. Complete silence except creek water and night insects. "Maybe he gave up," Lucky whispered. Curtis Dason shook his head. He'd heard stories about Bass Reeves. The Marshal didn't give up. Ever. Jim French checked his revolver, suddenly aware they'd made a mistake splitting up. They were spread thin, tired, running on fear instead of planning. Cherokee Bill himself was supposed to be riding in from the south, backup in case things went wrong. But where was he? The gang watered their horses, listening to every sound. A branch snapped somewhere upstream. All 3 men spun, guns drawn. Nothing, just darkness and the sound of their own breathing. What they didn't see, Bass Reeves crouched 200 yards downstream, watching them through the trees. He'd arrived 30 minutes earlier, studied their camp, counted weapons, assessed their state. They were rattled. Good. Rattled men made mistakes. He noted their plan: stay together now, wait for Cherokee Bill, then decide whether to fight or run at first light. Reeves had a different plan. He moved silent as smoke through the timber, positioning himself between their camp and the watering spot downstream where horses would inevitably go at dawn. There, hidden in thick brush, he prepared a rope snare across the narrow trail leading to the water. Simple trap, taught to him by creek hunters decades ago. The badge glinted faintly in moonlight as he worked. By sunrise, 1 outlaw would be in custody. The others would panic. Hour 5 arrived with dawn. Lucky volunteered to take the horses downstream to the deeper water, the spot where animals could drink without stumbling on creek rocks. He was edgy, expecting an ambush from the trees, watching the ridgeline for movement. He didn't watch the ground. The rope snare caught his ankle the moment he stepped onto the narrow trail. He went down hard, and before he could shout, Bass Reeves emerged from the brush like a ghost. Winchester leveled. "Don't," Reeves said quietly. One word. Lucky froze. Reeves handcuffed him to a tree, gagged him with a bandana, left a note pinned to his shirt. Wait here. The whole operation took 90 seconds. Silent, efficient, professional. Lucky's horse wandered back to camp alone 20 minutes later. Jim French and Curtis Dason found it grazing, saddle empty, reins dragging. They knew immediately what it meant. Reeves had them. Panic set in fast. Curtis wanted to run, head for the nations, lose themselves in Cherokee territory, disappear. Jim French refused. Cherokee Bill would arrive any minute with reinforcements. They could fight, maybe win, definitely survive. They were wrong about Cherokee Bill. He'd been delayed by a federal roadblock near Muskogee, wouldn't arrive for hours. But Jim and Curtis didn't know that. They held position, backs against a rock outcrop, scanning the tree line. The sun rose higher, no sign of Reeves, no sound. Just the terrible certainty that he was out there, watching, waiting, closing in. He's hunting us, Curtis said finally. The words hung in the air like a confession. That's when they understood. This wasn't about arrest anymore. This was about teaching a lesson. Bass Reeves was demonstrating what happened when you disrespected the badge. They'd wanted to humiliate him. Now he was proving they couldn't escape him. Hour 6 broke Curtis Dason. He stood up, hands raised, shouting into the timber, Reeves, I surrender, I'm done. Jim French grabbed his arm, furious, but Curtis shook him off. He walked into the clearing, unarmed, hands high above his head. I'm coming out. Don't shoot. Bass Reeves stepped from behind a tree 40 feet away, rifle ready but not aimed. He'd been there the whole time, close enough to hear them arguing, waiting for exactly this moment. Curtis dropped to his knees, actually crying. Please, he said. We didn't know. We were drunk. Please stop. Reeves handcuffed him without speaking, sat him against a tree next to Lucky. 2 down, 1 to go. Jim French watched from the rocks, understanding flooding through him like cold water. Reeves wasn't trying to kill them. He was collecting them, one by one, methodically, making them surrender not through violence, but through the sheer psychological weight of knowing they couldn't outrun him, couldn't hide from him, couldn't do anything except wait until he decided to take them. It was worse than fighting. Fighting you could win or lose cleanly. This was inevitable. This was being hunted by a man who knew the territory better than you knew your own thoughts, who'd tracked 3,000 criminals before you, who never stopped. Jim French had one choice left, run or surrender. He chose to run. He mounted his horse, kicked hard, rode south toward where Cherokee Bill should be. Bass Reeves watched him go. Then he mounted his own horse and followed. Not fast, not desperate, just steady, relentless pressure. The badge on his chest was clean now, polished by dust and movement. 6 hours into the hunt, Jim French was the last piece, and he was already broken. The final chase lasted 30 minutes. Jim French rode hard, whipping his horse, crashing through brush, trying every trick he'd learned in 5 years of running from the law. He doubled back, rode through creek beds to hide his trail, changed direction randomly. Nothing worked. Bass Reeves stayed behind him like a shadow, never closing fast, never falling back. Just there. Always there. Finally, 3 miles from where he'd started, Jim French's horse stumbled, exhausted. He dismounted, drew his revolver, turned to face his pursuer. Reeves rode into view, stopped 50 feet away. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the distance. The sun was high now, brutal and bright. I can't outrun you, Jim said. No, Reeves agreed. Can't hide from you? No. Can't fight you. Reeves didn't answer. Jim French looked at the gun in his hand, then at the badge on Reeves's chest. Clean, polished, untouchable. He thought about the spit, the insult, the laughter. It felt like something that happened 100 years ago to a different person. Slowly, he lowered the gun, set it on the ground, raised his hands. I surrender, he said. Bass Reeves nodded. He dismounted, walked forward, handcuffed Jim French with the same calm efficiency he'd used on the others. You spat on my badge, Reeves said quietly. First words he'd spoken to any of them since the crossroads. "Yes, sir," Jim French said. "That was a mistake." Reeves looked at him. "You gonna do it again?" "No, sir, never." Reeves nodded once. "Good." Then he marched Jim back to where the others waited, gathered all three prisoners, and began the long walk back to Fort Smith. The 40-mile march took 2 days. Bass Reeves set a relentless pace. No breaks except to water the horses, no rest except 4 hours of sleep each night with the prisoners handcuffed to trees. He fed them jerky and hardtack, gave them water from his own canteen, treated them professionally, but the pace never slowed. They walked and walked, footsore and exhausted, while Reeves rode behind them, Winchester across his saddle. On the second day, Cherokee Bill finally caught up. He'd brought 4 men, all armed, all ready for a shootout to free the gang. Reeves heard them coming a mile away. He positioned his prisoners behind rocks, took cover himself, and waited. When Cherokee Bill rode into view, he found Bass Reeves alone on the trail, rifle ready, 3 handcuffed men visible behind him. "That's as far as you come," Reeves called. Cherokee Bill studied the situation. 5 against 1 looked good, but it was Bass Reeves, and the man had already tracked 3 outlaws through 40 miles of territory in 6 hours. The math changed when you factored in reputation. Cherokee Bill turned his horse around. His men followed. No shots fired. The rescue attempt ended before it began. By the time they reached Fort Smith on the 3rd day, the story had already spread through Indian Territory. Word traveled fast in outlaw country. Cherokee Bill's gang had disrespected Bass Reeves, spat on his badge, laughed in his face. 6 hours later, all 3 were in custody. 40 miles of pursuit, 0 shots fired, 0 escapes. The psychological impact was immediate. Outlaws who heard the story started surrendering to other marshals, rather than risk Bass Reeves tracking them personally. The idea of being hunted by a man who never stopped, who knew every trail, who could find you in darkness, in wilderness, in places you thought were secret, it was worse than prison. It was being prey. When Reeves marched his prisoners up the courthouse steps, a crowd had gathered. Judge Isaac Parker himself came out to meet them. The 3 outlaws looked broken, exhausted, filthy, humiliated. The crowd expected them to be defiant. Instead, Jim French spoke clearly to everyone watching. "Don't ever disrespect that badge," he said, nodding toward Reeves. "That man will hunt you to the end of the earth." The silver badge on Reeves's chest caught afternoon sunlight, gleaming. He'd cleaned it every morning during the march. Now it looked exactly as it had before the insult. Untouchable. The trial lasted 1 day. Jim French, Curtis Dason, and Lucky were convicted of robbery, assault on a federal officer, and evading arrest. All 3 pled guilty, no defense. Judge Parker sentenced them to 5 years each in the federal prison at Fort Leavenworth. Before sentencing, the judge asked Bass Reeves if he wanted to make a statement. Reeves stood, looked at the prisoners, then at the courtroom. "I don't hunt for revenge," he said. "I hunt because it's the law. These men disrespected the badge, and the badge represents every person in this territory who depends on justice. That's worth defending." The words were simple. The impact wasn't. Newspapers, from Fort Smith to Kansas City, ran stories about the 6-hour manhunt. Harper's Weekly published a sketch of Bass Reeves, the silver badge prominent on his chest. The legend grew, but Reeves himself went back to work. 3 days after the trial, he rode out on another assignment, a horse thief operating near Tulsa. The routine continued. The badge stayed polished. And across Indian Territory, outlaws learned a lesson that would echo for decades. You could run from Bass Reeves, you could hide, you could disrespect him, but you couldn't escape him. He'd find you, always. The career numbers tell the final story. Bass Reeves served as a U.S. Marshal for 32 years until 1907, when Oklahoma became a state and Indian Territory ceased to exist. Over 3,000 arrests, 14 justifiable killings, 0 wounds received in the line of duty. He brought in criminals that other marshals wouldn't touch, tracked fugitives through country that swallowed entire posses, and never, not once, let a prisoner escape his custody. The badge he wore during the 6-hour manhunt stayed with him until retirement. When he finally turned it in, it was still polished to a mirror shine. Reeves died in 1910 at age 72. largely forgotten by history but legendary among those who knew the real West. The badge itself disappeared into private collections, but its reputation never faded. Today, that silver U.S. Marshal badge sits in a museum collection, restored and displayed under glass. The eagle emblem still catches light the way it did in 1895. Visitors read the placard about Bass Reeves, first black deputy marshal west of the Mississippi, over 3,000 arrests, the 6-hour manhunt that became legend. Some see a relic. Others see what it represented: dignity earned through relentless competence, respect demanded and proven, justice pursued when the easy option was letting insults slide. The badge doesn't look special, just silver and metal, standard government issue. But it carried the weight of a man who understood one principle completely. Sometimes respect isn't given. It's hunted down and proven, mile by mile, hour by hour, until the only option left is surrender.